right, so as I said in the previous video that I could do two videos on this two completely different topics, but using the same data set, I'm going to go ahead and do the second one here, and it's kind of a natty or not can you actually tell question. And the answer is no, but I'll explain to you why. And this is actually more complex than I even realized. So first off, I need to take a step back and admit that I'm wrong. So I used to believe that this FFMI number was actually important. That's embarrassing. So yeah, so you've probably heard this claim somewhere that FFMI is this predictor, right? So if anything that you look at here, you look at these studies, actually it's a poor study now that I understand this topic better. So it's called a fat-free mass index. So that's basically saying is how much muscle mass and bone mass, etc., how much do you have fat-free mass relative to like your height, and we can mark out this ratio and it gives you this number. It's a fat-free mass index, FFMI. Anything over 25 is suspicious, right? Because in this study they looked at it and people who were drug-free had an FFMI under 25, and people who had used drugs or were using drugs had an FFMI over 25. On the surface level, this seems like it would work. This seems like it would be a good ratio. Like, hey, you can look at this ratio, and people who are enhanced have more fat-free mass than people who are not enhanced. For a frame of reference, I have an FFMI of 21. Okay? What does that mean? Well, it actually doesn't mean shit. So I wish I could tell you that there was something significant to this, but basically 25 is supposedly the natty limit. So, I have a FFMI of 21, therefore I could gain more fat-free mass, and somehow at 21 is not my natty limit. I would be able to gain more till I get to 25. Now, I don't believe that. I actually believe that I'm probably very close to the limit that my body can handle. I don't think I could get to 25. If I did the math and I work it out, for me to get to 25 would be a lot of muscle mass for me to gain. I don't think so. I think 21 is about as far as I'm going to take it. Maybe I'll make it to 22 someday, but probably not. And so do I really believe that 25 is a hard cutoff? No, I don't. No, I don't. Because even if I took drugs, which, Greg Nuckols and Mike Israetel say only add 5%. So, if I add 5% to myself, I still would not be 25. Yeah. Now, that's not me saying that. I don't believe that. I believe that drugs add about 50%. Because if you look at people that snatch, 200, and then they test positive and they come off, their lifts go down really significantly. Like, big time. And that's someone who is a former user, so that's not a never user, that is a former user, right? So you see this person go from a 200 kilo snatch to 140. And it's like, wow, that's just from coming off. Wonder what your snatch would have been had you never used it at all. Anyways, or you'll listen to someone who shares their story where like, oh, I squatted 800 natural, and then I started using drugs, and then I squatted 1,200. It's like, wow, that's a very significant increase in your back squat for a powerlifter. Think about that. You're squatting 800 drug-free, you start using drugs, and then you squat 1,200. That's incredible. Anyways, I'm only citing what Greg Nuckols and Mike Israetel have said. I don't have a reason to disagree with them. It's supposedly up to 10%. So somewhere between 5 and 10% is what you can gain. I assume that the 10% is for people who are taking everything by the kitchen sink, which I don't think would be an intelligent thing to do. Anyways, why does all this even matter? Well, it matters because Jan Todd did a study where they evaluated this, and before drugs ever were even discovered and invented, there were lifters who had a fat-free mass index well over 25. There were lifters who were like 30. There were lifters who were over 30. How's that possible? Steroids didn't exist yet, and that's correct. Those people are what you would call an outlier. Are there people who are genetically gifted and can have a fat-free mass index over 25 without drugs? And the answer is yes, absolutely. But take a look at the NBA. We have individuals walking around 7 feet tall. They are so much taller than you. This is more than just 2 standard deviations. They're well over 2 standard deviations from the norm, okay? So if there are people walking around at 7 feet tall, there are people walking around even taller than 7 feet tall. Look at Hafthor Bjornsson. Right. So, you see these people, Shaquille O'Neal, LeBron James, like, you don't understand how tall these people are. They aren't just tall. Like, they're well past what you would ever say a human being could be if you just looked at averages. You would be like, well, based on the average, it would be unreasonable to think that someone could ever be 7 feet tall. And yet those people exist. So by the same way that we look at this, you could say IQ. The average IQ is 100. 2 standard deviations, you're at like 115. And yet there are people who scored a 1600 on their SAT, which suggests that they have an IQ of probably 160 or above. There are people with IQs that are, as we can understand, are unmeasurable. They're at least 200, but they're definitely more because the test is not accurate over 200. So there are people with IQs out there that are literally double what the average IQ is. So the average is 100, and there's someone out there with an IQ of 200. That is mind-boggling to think that someone could be twice, whenever 2 standard deviations would put you only at 115. Similarly for height, how could it be 2 standard deviations away from what, 5'10" is the average male now, and somehow someone out there is over 7 feet tall? That seems impossible. Well, by the same token, look at muscle mass. So if we said that, 2 standard deviations and somehow, you would not be able to be past 25 and all this shit like that, yeah, just like how there are 7 feet tall individuals and there are individuals with IQs over 200, yep, you could have someone who has a fat-free mass index that's over 30 and has never used drugs. Those people started on third base. You see, there's a difference there. You see, for some of us, we had to start out with nothing. And we made it to first base, and we made it to second base, and we made it to third base, and, well, we're probably never going to make it home. But some people started on third base. They started with more muscle mass than you. It's like the story of Ed Cohn. I can't even remember what the number was, but it was like the first time he ever deadlifted, he pulled some incredible weight. And it's like, holy shit, I've been training for 10 years and I didn't get to that point. You know what I mean? Like, some people started out where you had to work 10 years to get to. What was it? Bill Kazmaier tells a story where he was able to like clean and press more than he even weighed as a kid. Most people have to train for years to get to the point where they can clean and press their own body weight. Bill Kazmaier did it on his first try. Like, some people started out on third base genetically for their strength and their muscle mass. Then once you add in, years of training and eating right, they're going to be past you before they even touch an anabolic drug. They're going to be past the norm. They're going to be past the standard deviations. This is uncommon. That's the part that's good and important here. This is still uncommon. We're talking a very small percentage of people that will do this, but that does not mean that that does not exist. Because if there's 8 billion people on the planet and 1% of them have, muscle mass that is beyond what is normally achievable, okay, you now have 1% of 8 billion, which is still a lot of fucking people. Yeah. So, you can't just rule that out, especially whenever these people tend to self-select. Like, if you make good gains in the gym, you're encouraged to keep doing it. Therefore, you end up getting jacked because you made good progress. Whereas the people who have bad genetics for it, they work out for a while and they say, fuck this, I'm not making any progress, and they give up. All this being said, now we're going to get into the other side of it. And that's the part where I kind of touched on in the other video, where I mentioned the fact that there are guys out there doing 200 milligrams of TRT, and they don't look like they even fucking lift. I have met individuals who voluntarily, they had someone say they want to brag about it. Without me even asking, they inform me, I'm taking this, and this. And I'm like, okay. Why do you even tell me this? I didn't ask. And they share it with me, and I'm like, I'm looking at this guy, and I'm like, dude, do you lift? You work out? I would never have guessed. And then there are guys that they look like they work out, don't get me wrong. Maybe they're super shredded lean, they have six-pack abs. But I would never think this dude's running fucking DECA and test. Like, motherfucker, you weigh 70 kilos. You're like 170 centimeters tall. For those of you who don't do metric, that's fine. We're talking roughly people that are like $150 and they're like 5'9", 5'10". You don't look like you're on drugs, but you are. And this is the part where I point out, natty or not, you really can't tell. Like, you have no idea. Like, just by looking at someone, you can't tell. There are guys who are taking everything out there, and they weigh 150 pounds at 5'9". There are guys taking everything out there, and they weigh 185 pounds at 5'9". And then there are guys out there who are 5'9", and they are 205 pounds shredded lean, and they've never touched drugs in their entire life. Some people just started out on third base. And so what you're looking at here is you can't possibly judge these things. The guy that looks like he isn't on anything might be, and the guy that you would think is on everything might not be. So you can't tell based on that. And you can't tell based on strength either, because strength is very neurological. I think it's funny. Lots of people are surprised at how much I can deadlift. They're like, I didn't think you'd be able to deadlift that much. And it's true. It doesn't make any sense to me either. I look at my squat and I'm like, why is my squat so pathetically low? And yet I can deadlift. I don't even know what my max deadlift is because I've never tested it. I'm afraid to. I don't want to tear a bicep or something. So I double overhand and I pull 455 off the ground like it's nothing for me. I don't even strain. I don't struggle. There's no hitching. There's no grinding the rep. And I was just like, And so I just did like 10 singles at 455, and I was like, good enough. Now, is that something special about me? Yeah, well, it is. I have very long arms. I have unusually large hands, and I have very, very long arms. I'm weird. My wingspan is insane. I don't know why this happened to me. I have very big hands and very, very long arms. Now, what this means, though, is that mechanically, I have an advantage. Yes, I have an advantage, and that makes my deadlift disproportionately high, despite my size. This is not a good thing for pull-ups. I have long arms. This is not a good thing for bench press. I have long arms. And it's not really a great thing for squats either, because I don't have really great legs. I don't have like short femurs and a good mechanical advantage for squats. So, I struggle to improve my squat, and yet my deadlift goes up without ever doing deadlifts. It's like if my squat goes up at all, my deadlift goes up. And it's not because I train deadlift. I almost never deadlift. But it's because of the mechanics. So limb lengths make a difference. And this is why you will see some people who have a huge squat and they can't deadlift. Why? Because they're built to squat. You'll see guys that are built to bench press. They have short arms and a big wide chest. Man, that guy can bench press a house. And he can't deadlift for shit because that stuff becomes mechanical. Okay, so that isn't just muscle mass there. There's a big factor when it comes to lifts. Are you built to lift? You can't snatch like Lou because you're not built like Lou. Sorry. You can't clean like Ilya because you're not built like Ilya. Now, you might have a squat that's bigger than theirs. Undoubtedly, there is someone out there who competes in powerlifting that can squat more than Ilya or squat more than Lou at the same body weight, but yet they're not built to do snatches and cleans. And so, this should not shock you. Shane Hunt is insanely strong. And I think I saw somewhere that he said his best snatch was 235 pounds. And it's like, well, I've snatched 235 pounds, but I am nowhere near the strength levels that Shane Hunt has. So, is it a strength issue or is it like a mechanical issue? And I believe it's a mechanical issue. You either have the range of motion and the limb lengths and the joint angles, or you don't. Sometimes it plays into your advantage. My snatch is disproportionately good to my clean, and I can't jerk for shit. Only champions can jerk, which is why I suck. I have never, ever pretended like I don't, by the way. I always tell people all the time, yes, I bomb out every time. I will go to a meet, and I will clean the weight 3 times with ease and miss all 3 jerks. Because that's what I do. I suck at jerks. It doesn't make sense to me, but all I can assume is that I'm just not built to jerk. And I can tell you that. I am well aware that I don't jerk well. I can clean it, can't make the jerk. Can't split jerk, can't squat jerk, and my power jerk is not all that impressive either. But man, I don't have any problem getting into position underneath a heavy overhead squat. I can overhead squat 275 for a triple. It's like, that makes no fucking sense to me. And the funny thing is that the only reason why I know that is because I can't get 285 overhead. So I can get 275 overhead. I can squat it for 3, but I can't get 285 overhead. So I don't know what my max overhead squat is because I can't get anything heavier overhead. Okay, this becomes limb lengths, so you can't base it off of strength. I know that was way too long-winded explaining the strength part of it, but the strength part of it is neurological as well as biomechanical. In terms of muscle mass, though, some people are just born on third base. And so the big long thing to this whole story is, can you tell just by looking at someone? No, you can't. And you can't tell by strength numbers. You can't tell by hardly anything. And I wish I could tell you could tell by drug tests, but we all know that people have figured out that drug tests are really just, there's too many ways to get around them. And so you really don't know anything. And you can't really tell by blood work either, because people can take bioidentical hormones. You can even take luteinizing hormone, actually. So whenever people tell you, oh, well, if they have a normal testosterone level, but their LH and FSH are... No. People apparently can get a hold of LH and FSH, and I don't have any reason to doubt that people who are making lots of money off of this stuff will spend the money to make sure they pass the drug tests. I mean, think about it. If someone was paying you $10 million a year to play a sport, would you spend the money to pass the drug test? Yes, you would. That's an investment. You're making $10 million to play a sport. So, Lance Armstrong never failed a drug test. That's something. Let that sink in. So, the takeaway from this whole big long thing, though, is I'm explaining to you that no, you can't base it off of FFMI, the fat-free mass index is flawed. You can't base it off of strength. You really can't base it off of anything. It's too hard to say with any definitive proof that anyone is or isn't, because even if they are that 1% outlier in a world with 8 billion people, that is still all going to be a lot of people, and those people are probably going to rise to the top. So that's the takeaway on this whole thing. I know this is unpopular, but I'm just trying to stick to the facts, and the facts are the facts. People were achieving fat-free mass indexes over 30 before drugs were before testosterone was even synthesized or discovered. People were bigger than that. So you can't possibly tell me that those people were taking testosterone because it didn't exist. And similarly with strength, there were people that achieved amazing strength numbers. There was guys that were squatting 3 times their body weight. Let that sink in. This isn't a time before we had calibrated barbells and really nice monolifts and shit. And there were people that were deadlifting 4 times their body weight. There were dudes picking up stones and carrying them. Stones people can't pick up today. So, yeah, that's what you're looking at. You're looking at a situation where you can kind of infer, yeah, he probably is or probably isn't, but you will never actually know for certain.